Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he floated his small ship through the asteroid field. The old salvage vessel Lucky Strike groaned and creaked with every movement, but she had been his home for 15 years now. Jake knew every sound she made and every bolt that needed tightening. Today felt different, though. His scanner had picked up something strange about 3 hours ago, and now he was close enough to see what it was. The ship ahead of him was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It was sleek and silver, with curves that seemed to flow like water, frozen in space. No rust covered its surface, and no battle damage marked its hull. It just floated there, dark and silent among the rocks. Jake had seen plenty of wrecks in his time as a scrap collector, but this one made him nervous. Still, scrap metal was scrap metal, and he needed the money. Jake guided Lucky Strike closer to the strange vessel. His docking clamps found purchase on what looked like an airlock, and the two ships locked together with a heavy thud. Jake pulled on his old EVA suit and checked his oxygen levels. The suit had seen better days, with patches covering holes and duct tape holding some seals together, but it still worked. He grabbed his cutting torch and scanner before cycling through the airlock. The moment Jake stepped onto the alien ship, he knew something was wrong. Emergency lights flickered weakly along the corridors, casting strange shadows on the walls. The air felt thick and humid, and his breath fogged inside his helmet, despite the environmental controls. The ship was dying, that much was clear. Power was failing throughout the vessel, and Jake could hear the distant hum of life support systems struggling to keep working. Jake moved carefully through the corridors, his boots making soft sounds on the smooth floor. The walls were covered in symbols he could not read, glowing faintly with their own light. Everything seemed designed for beings taller than humans, with doorways that rose high above his head and control panels placed at awkward heights. Despite the alien nature of the ship, Jake felt drawn deeper inside. His scanner kept beeping, indicating valuable metals and technologies all around him. As Jake explored the ship, he began to notice that the emergency lighting grew brighter the deeper he went. The failing power systems seemed to be directing everything toward the center of the vessel. Jake followed the strongest power readings down a long corridor that ended in a heavy door. The door stood partially open, and warm light spilled out. From whatever lay beyond, Jake squeezed through the gap and found himself in what looked like a control room. Banks of alien computers lined the walls, their screens flickering with symbols and patterns he could not understand. In the center of the room sat a large chair that might have been meant for the ship's captain. But what caught Jake's attention was the small alcove behind the chair, where a soft blue glow pulsed like a heartbeat. Jake approached the alcove carefully, his scanner going crazy with readings he had never seen before. Inside the small space sat a pod about the size of a coffin, made from the same flowing metal as the ship's hull. The blue glow came from within the pod, and Jake could see that it was transparent on top. His breath caught in his throat when he looked inside. A tiny figure lay curled up in the pod, no bigger than a human baby. The being had pale blue skin that seemed to glow with its own light, and silver-white hair that moved gently as if floating in water. Small crystalline growths decorated the creature's temples, catching and reflecting the blue light. The being's chest rose and fell slowly. Then Jake realized he was looking at a child. Jake's hands shook as he studied the pod's controls. His scanner indicated that the life support systems were failing, and the power levels were dropping fast. The child would die if Jake did not act soon. He tried to read the alien symbols on the pod's control panel, but they meant nothing to him. Jake made a decision that would change his life forever. He began looking for a way to open the pod. The pod opened with a soft hiss, and warm air flowed out. The child stirred slightly, but did not wake. Jake reached in carefully and lifted the small form, surprised by how light the being felt. The child fit easily in his arms, and Jake could feel a gentle warmth radiating from the blue skin. As soon as Jake touched the child, the failing lights around them grew brighter, and the ship's systems seemed to stabilize slightly. Jake carried the child back to his ship as quickly as he could. The alien vessel was dying, and he could feel it shuddering around him as more systems failed. He made it back to Lucky Strike just as the emergency lights in the alien ship went out completely. Jake sealed the airlock behind him and began the procedure to undock from the derelict vessel. Once they were clear of the alien ship, Jake looked down at the child in his arms. The being was awake now, looking up at him with large golden eyes that seemed far too wise for such a young face. The child made soft chirping sounds that somehow felt familiar to Jake, like a language he had once known but forgotten. Jake found himself smiling, despite the strangeness of the situation. Jake set up a makeshift bed for the child in his quarters, using spare blankets and pillows to create a safe space. The child seemed comfortable in the human environment, reaching up with tiny hands to touch Jake's face when he leaned over the bed. Jake noticed that his ship's systems were running more smoothly than they had in years. The old reactor that usually coughed and wheezed was humming along perfectly, and even his broken coffee maker had started working again. Jake spent the rest of the day trying to figure out what the child needed. His medical scanner showed that the being was healthy but required nutrition that Jake did not have on his ship. Jake tried offering water and simple foods, but the child would not take anything. As night fell, Jake found himself talking to the child, explaining where they were and promising to keep the little one safe. The child seemed to respond to Jake's voice, making happy chirping sounds when he spoke and reaching toward him when he moved away. Jake decided to call the child Luna because of the silver-white hair that reminded him of moonlight. As Jake settled down to sleep, Luna curled up next to him, one tiny hand gripping his finger. Jake realized that his days as a lonely scrap collector were over. He was now responsible for this strange and wonderful child, and he would do whatever it took to keep Luna safe. 3 months had passed since Jake found Luna, and his life had changed in ways he never expected. The small child grew faster than any human baby, already walking on unsteady legs and babbling in a mix of English words and strange musical sounds. Jake had converted his storage bay into a proper room for Luna, complete with toys he had made from spare parts and colorful fabrics he had traded for at the last space station. Jake woke each morning to the sound of Luna's happy chirping as she played with her toys. She had learned to say Papa in her melodic voice, and the word never failed to make Jake smile. He had taught her simple words like eat, sleep, and ship, while she taught him that the crystalline growths on her temples glowed brighter. When she was excited or happy, Luna showed remarkable intelligence for her age. She understood complex concepts that Jake tried to explain, like how the ship's engines worked or why they needed to be careful around other vessels. When Jake worked on repairs, Luna would sit nearby and hand him tools, somehow always knowing exactly what he needed next. Her presence had transformed Lucky Strike from a barely functioning scrap hauler into a smooth-running ship that Jake was proud to call home. The most amazing thing about Luna was her effect on technology. Electronic devices seemed to respond to her moods and needs. When she was hungry, the food processor would start up on its own. When she was tired, the lights would dim automatically. Jake's old scanner, which had been glitchy for years, now worked perfectly whenever Luna was around. Jake did not understand how she did it, but he was grateful for the help. Jake had also discovered that Luna needed a special type of nutrition that his ship could not provide. Through trial and error, he learned that she could absorb energy directly from the ship's power systems. Luna would place her small hands on certain panels, and Jake would watch as she drew energy from the reactor. Strangely, This did not drain the ship's power, but seemed to make everything run more efficiently. On this particular morning, Jake was teaching Luna to identify different types of stars when his long-range sensors picked up 3 ships approaching. Fast, Jake's blood went cold as he recognized the sleek design. They looked exactly like the derelict ship where he had found Luna, but these ones were very much alive with power and purpose. Jake scooped Luna into his arms and rushed to the pilot's seat. The approaching ships were moving in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming silver against the black of space. Jake tried to change course, but the alien vessels matched his movements easily. Within minutes, they had surrounded Lucky Strike, and Jake knew there was no escape. A voice spoke over his communication system in perfect English, though it had an unusual musical quality that reminded Jake of Luna's chirping sounds. "Human. Vessel, you carry something that belongs to us. Prepare to be boarded." Jake looked down at Luna, who had gone very quiet in his arms. Her golden eyes were wide with what looked like fear, and the crystal growths on her temples had dimmed, too. Almost nothing. Jake activated his ship's external speakers and replied, "This is Jake Morrison aboard Lucky Strike. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a salvage operator." There was a pause before the voice spoke again, and this time Jake could hear excitement mixed with something that might have been relief. "You have Princess Zarolin aboard. Your vessel. We have been searching for her for many months." Princess. The word hit Jake like a physical blow. Luna was not just an abandoned child. She was royalty, and these ships had come to take her away from him. Jake felt Luna's small hand grip his shirt tighter, and he could hear her making distressed sounds. "Look," Jake said into the communicator. "I found a baby in a wrecked ship. I've been taking care of her. She's safe and healthy." The lead alien ship moved closer to Lucky Strike, and Jake could see boarding tubes extending toward his airlock. "We are grateful for your care of the princess," the voice said. "I am Commander Lyriceth of the Ethereal Dominion. The princess must return with us immediately. Her people need her." Jake wanted to refuse, wanted to run, but he knew it was hopeless. These ships could destroy Lucky Strike without effort. Jake carried Luna to the airlock, whispering reassurances that he did not feel. When the boarding tube sealed and the airlock opened, 3 tall figures in flowing robes stepped aboard. They were clearly the same species as Luna, with pale blue skin and crystalline growths, but they were much taller than humans and moved with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. The leader removed her hood, revealing a face that looked like an older version of Luna. Her golden eyes were the same, but her expression was cold and formal. Commander Lyriceth looked at Luna with obvious relief, then turned to Jake with something that might have been gratitude mixed with disapproval. "Princess Zarolin," Lyriceth said in her musical language, extending her arms toward Luna. But Luna shrank back against Jake, making frightened sounds. When Lyriceth reached for her, Luna cried out, "Papa," and buried her face in Jake's shirt. The commander's eyes widened in shock. "She calls you father," Lyriceth said in English. Her voice filled with disbelief. Jake felt protective anger rising in his chest. "Her name is Luna, and yes, I'm her father in every way that matters. I've fed her, protected her, and loved her for 3 months while you people were nowhere to be found." The other ethereals moved restlessly at Jake's tone, but Lyriceth raised a hand to stop them. "You do not understand," Lyriceth said. "Princess Zarolin is the heir to the ethereal throne. Her parents died in a coup, and she barely escaped with her life. The ship you found was her transport, carrying her to safety when it was damaged and lost power. We have been searching for her ever since." Jake felt Luna trembling against him and realized that the child understood more of what was being said than anyone realized. "She's just a baby," Jake said. "She doesn't care about thrones or politics. She just wants to be safe and loved. Lyricith's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. She is the last hope of our people. Without her, the ethereal dominion will fall into chaos. As if responding to the tension in the room, Luna's distress caused a sudden power surge throughout Lucky Strike. Lights flickered, computers beeped. Warnings, and the ship's engines hiccuped. The ethereal boarding party stepped back in alarm as Luna's crystal growths flared with brilliant light. Jake felt the energy washing over him, and he instinctively began rocking Luna gently, singing a lullaby he remembered from his own childhood. Luna calmed down, and the ship's systems returned to normal. Lyricith stared at Jake with new respect. She trusts you completely, the commander said quietly. In all our records, no ethereal child has ever bonded so strongly with an alien being. Jake met her gaze steadily. Maybe that tells you something about what she needs. After a long moment, Lyricith made a decision that surprised everyone. Human Jake Morrison, she said formally, I invite you to accompany Princess Zarelyn to our homeworld. Our customs require that a child her age have a guardian present during important ceremonies. Perhaps you could serve in that role until other arrangements can be made. Jake looked down at Luna, who was watching him with those wise golden eyes. He knew that going with the ethereals would mean leaving behind his simple life as a scrap collector. But he also knew that he could not abandon the child who had become his daughter. All right, Jake said, but her name is Luna, and I'm her father. Anyone who wants to change, that is going to have to deal with me first. Commander Lyricith actually smiled at that, the first real emotion Jake had seen from her. Very well, Jake Morrison. But you should know that the path ahead will not be easy. There are those among our people who will not welcome a human guardian. For our future queen. Jake shifted Luna to his other arm and looked around at the assembled ethereals. Then they better get used to disappointment, he said, because I'm not going anywhere. Jake had seen many amazing things in his years traveling through space, but nothing had prepared him for the ethereal homeworld of Lysithia. The planet hung before them like a giant blue-green jewel, covered in crystalline cities that sparkled. In the light of twin suns, floating platforms drifted through the atmosphere like clouds, connected by bridges of pure energy that arced between them in graceful curves. As their ship descended toward the capital city, Jake held Luna close and watched her reaction to seeing her homeworld for the first time. Her golden eyes were wide with wonder, and her crystal growths pulsed with gentle light as she babbled excitedly in her native language. Commander Lyricith smiled at the child's excitement, but Jake could see worry in the older ethereal's expression. The landing platform was crowded with ethereals in elaborate robes, their tall forms creating a sea of pale blue faces and glittering crystals. Jake felt very out of place in his worn work clothes, especially when he noticed how the crowd stared at him. Some faces showed curiosity, others showed disapproval, and a few showed what looked like disgust. Jake tightened his grip on Luna and reminded himself that he was here for her, not for them. A tall ethereal in dark robes approached their group, moving with the confident stride of someone used to being in charge. His crystal growths were larger and more elaborate than the others, forming an almost crown-like pattern across his forehead. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute power. "Welcome home, Princess Zarelyn," the figure said. But his golden eyes were fixed on Jake rather than the child. "I am Regent Mordain, your uncle and current ruler of the ethereal dominion. We have much to discuss about your future." Luna pressed closer to Jake and made a soft sound that he had learned meant she was nervous or afraid. Jake stepped forward, slightly, positioning himself between Luna and the Regent. "Nice to meet you," Jake said in his most polite tone. "I'm Jake Morrison, Luna's guardian. She's been through a lot, so I hope we can take things slow and let her adjust gradually." Mordane's eyes narrowed at Jake's casual manner and his use of the human name for the princess. "The child will be cared for by proper ethereal attendants," Mordane said coldly. "Your services are no longer required, human. You will be compensated for your trouble and given passage back to your own territories." Jake felt Luna's small hands grip his shirt tighter, and he could hear her making distressed chirping sounds. Commander Lyricith stepped forward before Jake could respond. "Uncle, the princess has formed a strong bond with Jake Morrison. Perhaps it would be wise to allow him to remain as her cultural advisor while she adjusts to royal life." Mordane's expression darkened, and Jake could sense the political undercurrents flowing between the two ethereals. "The princess has been contaminated by human influence," Mordane said sharply. "She must be purified and taught proper ethereal ways before she can assume any royal duties. This human attachment is unseemly and dangerous." As if responding to the harsh words, Luna began to glow brighter, and Jake felt the familiar tingle of energy building around them. Jake began humming softly, a tune he had learned Luna enjoyed, and gradually the child calmed down. The demonstration of his ability to soothe the young princess was not lost on the watching crowd. Lyricith seized the moment to make her point. "As you can see, Uncle, Jake Morrison has a unique ability to calm the princess when she becomes distressed. Given her importance to our people's future, perhaps his skills could be valuable during this transition period." Mordane looked frustrated, but could not argue with the evidence before him. Over the following days, Jake found himself housed in a suite of rooms adjacent to Luna's royal quarters in the Crystal Palace. The accommodations were beyond anything he had ever experienced, with walls that shifted color based on his mood and furniture that adjusted itself to his comfort. But Jake felt like a prisoner in a beautiful cage, constantly watched by guards and servants who made no effort to hide their suspicion of him. Luna struggled with the formal protocols of royal life. She was expected to wear elaborate robes instead of the simple clothes Jake had made for her, to eat complex meals instead of the basic foods she was used to, and to speak only in formal ethereal instead of the mix of languages she had learned. From Jake, the child became increasingly withdrawn and unhappy, crying for her papa whenever the royal attendants tried to separate them. Jake began to understand the political situation through conversations with Lyricith and observation of court life. Mordane had been ruling his region for months, making decisions that increased his own power while claiming to act in the princess's best interests. Many of the noble houses supported him because they feared change, while others whispered that he had no intention of giving up power when Luna came of age. The situation became more dangerous when Jake started receiving threats. Anonymous messages appeared in his rooms warning him to leave before something unfortunate happened to him. His food began to taste strange, and he suspected someone was trying to poison him slowly. Jake started preparing his own meals and sleeping with one eye open, but he refused to leave Luna's side. Jake's unconventional approach to problems began to show results when he suggested solutions that the ethereals had not considered. When a trade dispute arose with a neighboring system, Jake proposed a compromise based on human business practices that satisfied both sides. When palace security was breached by protesters, Jake recommended changes to guard rotations that he had learned from his years avoiding authority figures. Luna began to flourish when Jake convinced the royal tutors to let him participate in her education. He taught her human history and customs, while she learned ethereal traditions and responsibilities. The combination created a unique perspective that impressed even her critics. Luna started proposing ideas that combined the best of both cultures, showing wisdom beyond her years. The crisis came when an assassination attempt was made during a formal court ceremony. Jake had noticed suspicious movement in the crowd and threw himself between Luna and a hidden attacker just as an energy weapon discharged. The blast meant for Luna struck Jake in the shoulder, sending him to the ground in agony. Luna's scream of rage and fear sent a pulse of energy through the palace that shattered crystal windows and overloaded electronic systems throughout the building. As palace guards subdued the assassin, Jake struggled to remain conscious while Luna clung to him, her small hands trying to stop the bleeding from his wound. Through the pain, Jake could hear her voice switching between English and ethereal as she begged him not to leave her. The sight of the human risking his life to protect their princess moved many of the watching nobles, while Luna's obvious love for her guardian made it clear that separating them would harm the child. Regent Mordain arrived at the scene, looking both concerned and frustrated. Jake suspected that the regent had not ordered the assassination, but was not entirely unhappy about it either. As medical attendants worked to stabilize Jake's injury, Mordain knelt beside Luna and tried to comfort her in formal ethereal phrases. But the child ignored her uncle completely, focusing all her attention on Jake and refusing to let go of his uninjured hand. Jake looked up at Mordain through waves of pain and spoke clearly enough for the surrounding nobles to hear. "She needs both worlds," he said, "human heart and ethereal wisdom. Don't make her choose between them." Mordain's expression was unreadable, but Jake saw something that might have been understanding flicker in the regent's golden eyes. As Jake was carried away to the medical facility, Luna's voice followed him down the corridor. She was speaking in perfect ethereal, but her words were aimed at the assembled nobles rather than the adults trying to calm her. Jake did not understand the language, but he could hear the authority and determination in her young voice. Luna was no longer just a frightened child. She was beginning to become a queen. 1 year had passed since the assassination attempt, and Jake's shoulder still ached when the weather changed, but he had learned to ignore the pain. Luna had grown taller and more confident, now looking like a child of 7 human years, but speaking with the wisdom of someone much older. The assassination attempt had changed everything between them. Luna no longer saw Jake just as her beloved guardian, but as someone who had literally died to protect her. Jake had evolved from reluctant caretaker to Luna's primary advisor and protector. He attended all her lessons, helped her navigate the complex politics of the ethereal court, and taught her practical skills that no royal tutor would think to include. Luna learned how to fix broken machines, how to read people's intentions from their body language, and how to make friends with servants and guards who others ignored. The palace had become more comfortable for both of them over the months. Luna had insisted that Jake's quarters be connected to hers, and she had refused all attempts to make her speak only formal ethereal. Instead, she developed a habit of switching between languages depending on her audience, using English when she wanted to be casual and personal, and ethereal when she needed to sound royal and official. Jake had also formed unexpected alliances within the court. Captain Ryan Torres, a human diplomatic attaché who had arrived 6 months ago, became a valuable friend who understood the challenges of being human in an alien environment. Kiramov, a young ethereal noble who genuinely supported Luna's claim to the throne, often provided Jake with information about court politics and potential threats. The peaceful routine was shattered when urgent news arrived from the HFY outer territories. The Corvan Empire, a militaristic neighbor that had been testing ethereal borders for years, had launched a full-scale invasion. 3 star systems had already fallen, and Corvan fleets were advancing toward the heart of ethereal space. Jake attended the Emergency War Council meeting, where ethereal military commanders presented their plans to Regent Mordain and the assembled nobles. The strategies were technically sound, but followed rigid patterns that Jake recognized from his study of military history. The ethereals had superior technology, but their tactics were predictable, and their command structure was slowed by political considerations. When the council asked for input, Jake surprised everyone by speaking up. "The Corvins are expecting you to fight the way you always fight," he said. "What if you did something they're not prepared for?" The suggestion was met with skeptical looks from the military commanders, but Luna leaned forward with interest. Jake proposed using smaller, faster ships to strike at Corvin supply lines, while the main ethereal fleet engaged their battle groups. He suggested coordinating attacks with civilian freighters that could carry troops behind enemy lines, and using Luna's unique abilities to coordinate multiple battle groups simultaneously. The military commanders were outraged by the suggestions, calling them desperate and undignified, but Regent Morgaine saw the logic in Jake's unconventional thinking. More importantly, Luna supported the plans with her growing authority and influence. Despite the protests of the nobles, Morgaine authorized a limited trial of Jake's strategies in the defense of the Keller system. The battle was unlike anything the Ethereals had ever fought. Luna, now strong enough to interface with multiple ship systems at once, coordinated the movements of dozens of vessels, while Jake relayed tactical information and suggestions. The combination of ethereal technology and human military thinking proved devastatingly effective. The Caravan fleet was routed, and 3 of their capital ships were captured intact. Word of the victory spread quickly, and suddenly Jake found himself recognized as a legitimate military advisor rather than just Luna's strange human guardian. More importantly, Luna's role in the battle showed everyone that she was ready to take on real responsibilities as a leader. But Jake began to worry about the cost of Luna's growing power. Each time she used her abilities to coordinate battle, fleets, or interface with complex systems, she seemed drained afterward. The child who had once played happily with simple toys now spent hours studying tactical reports and political documents. Jake watched her childhood slipping away and felt guilty about his role in pushing her toward adult responsibilities. The war continued for months, with Jake and Luna working together to develop new strategies and coordinate defense efforts. Luna's tactical insights combined with Jake's practical experience created solutions that neither humans nor ethereals would have developed alone. But the constant pressure was taking its toll on both of them. The crisis came when Jake was captured during a reconnaissance mission behind enemy lines. His ship had been disabled by Corvin fighters, and he was taken prisoner while trying to gather intelligence on their fleet movements. For the first time since they had met, Jake and Luna were truly separated, with no way to communicate or help each other. Luna's reaction to Jake's capture surprised everyone who witnessed it. The calm, wise child they had grown used to seeing disappeared, replaced by a young girl who was terrified of losing the most important person in her life. She stormed into the War Council meeting and announced that she would personally lead a rescue mission to bring Jake home. Regent Morgaine and the military commanders tried to talk Luna out of the plan, arguing that it was too dangerous and that Jake was not worth risking the future queen's life. Luna's response was delivered in perfect formal ethereal, but her message was clear to everyone present. Jake was her father in every way that mattered, and she would not abandon him to enemy captivity. The rescue mission that Luna planned and lead was a masterpiece of tactical thinking. She used her abilities to coordinate multiple strike teams, disable Corvin security systems, and provide real-time intelligence to the rescue forces. Jake was freed from his prison cell just as Corvin reinforcements arrived, leading to a running battle through the enemy fleet that showcased both Luna's strategic brilliance and her deep love for her adoptive father. When they were finally safe aboard an ethereal cruiser, Jake held Luna close and whispered his thanks for coming after him. Luna looked up at him with those wise golden eyes and said quietly, "You saved me first, Papa. I could never leave you behind." The simple statement contained all the love and loyalty that had grown between them over the years. The successful rescue operation did more than just bring Jake home safely. It demonstrated to the entire ethereal dominion that Luna was ready to make the hard decisions that leadership required. More importantly, it showed that her bond with Jake made her stronger, not weaker. The nobles who had once questioned whether a human guardian was appropriate for their future queen now saw that Jake's influence had helped create exactly the kind of leader they needed. In the aftermath of the rescue, Luna made a decision that surprised everyone, including Jake. She announced that she wanted to formally adopt Jake as her father according to ethereal law. The legal process would make Jake not just her guardian and advisor, but a permanent member of the royal family, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. Jake was overwhelmed by the gesture, understanding what it meant for Luna to publicly declare their relationship in such formal terms. But he also realized that accepting the adoption would mean giving up any chance of returning to his old life as a simple scrap collector. When he looked at Luna's hopeful expression, however, Jake knew that his choice had been made long ago. On the day he first held her in his arms, the adoption ceremony was held in the great crystal hall of the palace, with representatives from across the ethereal dominion in attendance. When Luna placed her small hand in Jake's larger one and spoke the formal words that made them family in the eyes of the law, Jake felt a sense of belonging that he had never experienced before. He was no longer just a human outsider who had stumbled into an alien world. He was Luna's father, and that made him exactly where he belonged. 2 years had passed since Jake's formal adoption into the royal family, and the changes in both him and Luna were remarkable. Luna now looked like a 10-year-old human child, but possessed the wisdom and authority of a seasoned leader. The war with the Corvan Empire had ended 6 months ago with a peace treaty that Luna had personally negotiated, combining military victory with diplomatic innovation in a way that impressed even her former critics. Jake had grown into his role as Prince Consort. Jake Morrison, a title that still made him smile when he heard it. His advice was now sought by military commanders, trade negotiators, and even other royal families throughout the galaxy. The rough scrap collector had become a respected figure in galactic politics, known for his practical wisdom and unwavering loyalty to Luna. The palace had become a true home for them both. Jake's quarters were now permanently connected to Luna's, and they had established routines that balanced her royal duties with the normal activities of a father and daughter. They still worked on mechanical projects together, shared meals in private when court schedules allowed, and Jake continued to tell her stories about human culture and history. Luna had successfully unified the various noble houses behind her. Leadership through a combination of political skill and genuine care for her people. She had introduced reforms based on human democratic principles while maintaining ethereal traditions, creating a system of government that was more responsive to citizens' needs. Her popularity among both nobles and commoners had made it clear that she would be an exceptional queen when she officially came of age. The final challenge to their life together came from an unexpected source. Earth's colonial authority had learned of Jake's position in the ethereal government and saw an opportunity to establish formal diplomatic relations with one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. They sent a delegation led by Director Susan Walsh, a cold and calculating politician who had built her career on manipulating others. Director Walsh requested a private meeting with Jake, claiming to bring greetings from his homeworld. But Jake quickly realized that her real purpose was much more sinister. She had brought records of his past activities, including his refusal to participate in colonial mining operations that would have displaced indigenous populations on frontier worlds. These documents show clear violations of colonial authority regulations, Walsh said with a predatory smile. Failure to follow lawful orders, obstruction of authorized operations, and unauthorized departure from assigned duties. Any one of these charges could result in life imprisonment. Jake felt his blood turn cold as he realized what she was threatening. Walsh continued her pitch with the smooth confidence of someone who was used to getting her way. Of course, these charges could be overlooked if you were willing to use your influence with the ethereal government to advance Earth's interests. Trade agreements, technology transfers, military cooperation. You could be the bridge between our civilizations. Jake looked at the documents Walsh had spread across the table, seeing his past laid out in official language that made his moral stands look like criminal acts. He thought about Luna, sleeping peacefully in her room, trusting him to protect her from exactly this kind of political manipulation. "And if I refuse?" Jake asked quietly. "Then you'll be arrested as soon as you set foot in human space," Walsh replied. "And I'm sure the ethereal nobles would have second thoughts about having a wanted criminal as their future queen's advisor. Political scandals have a way of damaging everyone they touch." Jake realized that Walsh had done her homework and knew exactly where to apply pressure. Jake spent a sleepless night walking through the crystal gardens of the palace, trying to decide how to handle the threat. He could agree to Walsh's demands and become a spy in Luna's court, betraying everything they had built together. He could run, taking Luna somewhere beyond Earth's reach, but that would mean abandoning her people and her responsibilities. Or he could face the accusations head-on, trusting that the truth would be enough to protect them both. In the morning, Jake made his decision. He found Luna in her study, working on trade proposals with Kiramoth and Captain Torres. When Jake explained the situation, Luna's reaction was swift and decisive. She immediately contacted Regent Morgan and convened an emergency council meeting to address the Earth delegation's demands. The confrontation in the Great Hall was unlike any diplomatic encounter the Ethereals had ever witnessed. Director Walsh presented her evidence with polished confidence, expecting the aliens to be impressed by Earth's official documentation and concerned about harboring a fugitive. Instead, she found herself facing a 10-year-old girl who spoke with the authority of absolute power. Luna listened to the accusations against Jake with growing anger, her crystal growths glowing brighter as her emotions intensified. When Walsh finished her presentation, Luna stood from her throne and addressed the Earth delegation in perfect English. "You claim that Jake Morrison is a criminal because he refused to harm innocent people. In the ethereal dominion we call that honor." Jake watched with pride as Luna systematically dismantled Walsh's arguments, pointing out that Jake's actions had been motivated by conscience rather than criminal intent. She produced testimony from the indigenous populations Jake had tried to protect, evidence that the mining operations had been unnecessary and destructive, and communications showing that Earth's colonial authority had ignored environmental impact. Reports. The revelation that Earth's government had been willing to destroy entire ecosystems for short-term profit horrified the ethereal nobles, who placed great value on environmental preservation. Luna's defense of Jake became a condemnation of the political system that had produced Walsh and her demands. Walsh tried to recover by threatening to expose the situation to Earth's media, claiming that Jake's position in an alien government made him a traitor to humanity. Luna's response was delivered with the cold authority of someone who had learned to command battle fleets. "Jake Morrison is not a traitor to humanity. He is the best example of what humanity can be." The final blow to Walsh's plans came when Luna announced that she was granting Jake full ethereal citizenship and diplomatic immunity, making him legally untouchable by Earth's authorities. More importantly, she declared that any attempt to harm or intimidate Jake would be considered an act of aggression against the ethereal dominion itself. With her leverage destroyed and her threats meaningless, Walsh had no choice but to retreat. But Luna was not finished with her yet. The young queen offered Earth a choice. They could establish normal diplomatic relations based on mutual respect and shared values, or they could continue their current policies and find themselves excluded from the growing alliance between the ethereal dominion and other civilizations. the Earth delegation left Lysithea, with a clear understanding that their political games would not work with Luna and Jake. More importantly, the confrontation had strengthened the bond between father and daughter, proving that they could face any challenge together. As Luna's official coronation approached, she made one final decision that surprised everyone who knew her. She announced that she would take Jake's surname as part of her royal title, becoming Queen Zaralyn Morrison. The gesture was unprecedented in ethereal history, but it perfectly symbolized the new kind of leadership Luna represented. The coronation ceremony was a magnificent spectacle that combined ethereal traditions with innovations that reflected Luna's unique perspective. Representatives from dozens of civilizations attended, including a new delegation from Earth led by officials who were much more respectful of both Luna's authority and Jake's position. When the ancient crown of the ethereal dominion was placed on Luna's head, Jake felt a mixture of pride and wonder at the journey that had brought them to this moment. The frightened child he had found in a derelict ship had become a wise and powerful queen, while the lonely scrap collector had found a family and purpose beyond anything he had ever imagined. After the official ceremonies ended, Luna found Jake on one of the palace balconies, looking out at the crystal cities that sparkled in the light of the twin suns. She joined him at the railing, the heavy crown replaced by a simple circlet that she wore for informal occasions. "Thank you, Papa," Luna said quietly, "for teaching me that being royal isn't about ruling over people. It's about caring for them." Jake smiled and put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "And thank you, little star, for teaching an old scrap collector that family isn't about blood. It's about choice." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the floating platforms drift through the evening sky. Jake thought about all the changes that had brought them to this moment. From that first day when he had found Luna in the failing alien ship to now, when she wore the crown of one of the galaxy's greatest civilizations, Luna was already making plans for the future, talking about establishing new trade relationships with human colonies, creating cultural exchange programs, and working with other species to build a more peaceful galaxy. Jake would be there to help her with all of it, just as he had promised on that first day when she had gripped his finger with her tiny hand. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jake realized that his days of searching for valuable scrap metal were truly